everyone and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I want to talk about a topic that I've been thinking about quite a lot in recent weeks and days, and that is theatre etiquette. Is the tea still hot on this hot button topic of discussion? No, but iced tea is also refreshing, so we're gonna go with it anyway. And also, yeah, I've been having a lot of thoughts and kind of been processing and digesting the discourse / news over the last couple of months regarding theatre etiquette, and I don't know, I feel like it's something I do want to talk about because there's so much more to it and there's so much nuance than I think is being shared in general. So I want to talk about it. The reason I feel like I have something to contribute to this topic is that I have seen audiences from many different angles. Firstly, I have been in theatre audiences for a long time. I think I first went to the theatre definitely before I was 10 with my mum. Also, as my resting job, I am an usher, and I've been an usher for many years, and whilst doing that job, I have ushered on many different types of show with many different types of audiences. And finally, if you're new to this channel, now's a good time to tell you, I am also an actor, and as an actor, I have performed in many different types of shows with many different types of audiences. I also think the topic of theatre etiquette touches on so many different other facets of theatre and its role in society in general. Things like class, things like accessibility, things like high art versus low art is a big thing. And also the idea of individualism, I think. The dichotomy of the individual versus the collective is one of the big reasons that we're probably having so many behavioural issues in theatre audiences as we do, which I think also spills into other aspects of society, but I'm starting to digress. So yeah, I want to talk about this, and I want to talk about the shades of grey that are within this topic of what is theatre etiquette. What are the rules of theatre? And before we go any further, obviously, this is just my opinion. You might be sitting here being like, Michaela, you're wrong, there are hard and fast rules, and if you talk in a performance, I have the right to punch you in the face. And you might be on the side being like, Michaela, individualism is king. Like, if I want to throw things at the stage and stand up and shout and scream in the middle of someone's like really deep soliloquy, I have the right to do that. Freedom of speech, freedom of expression. You do you. Like, I mean, there are actually like rules, and if you do either of those two things, you'll probably get kicked out of the theatre. But in terms of your opinion, you can have whatever opinion you want, and feel free to leave them in the comments. It helps my engagement. But seriously, like, I would be interested in having a civil discussion about this, because I don't think I have all the answers here. This is just things that I've been thinking about, things that I think can often get forgotten and missed, especially by those of us who are very much in the ride or die theatre. We go to the theatre all the time, we know how to behave. We can forget that not everyone's coming from the same place and be overly judgmental. So yeah, I hope that this video is helpful for people who want to have a further, deeper, more nuanced discussion about this. Also, hopefully for people who are like new to theatre or are feeling a bit out of whack of like, oh, and now I don't know how to behave if I want to go and see a show. Hopefully this will bring, if not clarity, some reassurance on how you can navigate things. I think that's all I'm going to do for the intro. Let's get into it. There's something about me like pointing at the camera and making noises when I go into like the main body of my videos. I don't know why I've started doing that, but it's a thing, so yeah. Let's start off with what are the rules, because even though I'm gonna deconstruct whether there are rules or not, I think that's just a good place to start because that's what all the discourse has mostly been about, and I think it's like an easy jumping off point. I'm gonna start off with the two rules which, in my opinion, are like firmly are like rules, like don't do this. And rule number one is don't get into fights. I don't feel like this is a theatre rule in so much as a life rule. Just don't get into fights with people. And if we're talking about specifically in theatre, like I'm ride or die for theatre. I love it. Like, it means so much to me. I'm here to tell you it is not that deep. If you're getting annoyed at someone being on their phone to the point where you want to have a verbal and physical altercation, you need to check yourself. If you're getting so annoyed at being told to please not sing along because we're here to watch the performers and not you, that you want to punch someone in the face, recheck your priorities. You shouldn't be getting into fights with other patrons. You definitely shouldn't be getting into fights with staff. We're just here to do our job, speaking for everyone who works front of house here, but like, we're just here to do a job. Most of us are doing this job because we have our days free to go to auditions or do whatever the hell else we're doing. Like, we're just here to pay our rent. And so the last thing we need is you getting in our faces because someone told you to be quiet. Reevaluate what is happening in your life, because you shouldn't be getting so angry to the point that the police need to be called to escort you out the building. Don't do it. Don't get yourself to a point of inebriation where you're gonna not be able to stop yourself from doing that either. Because oftentimes, in my experience anyway, like, the major conflict is always because things have been exacerbated by alcohol and people have lost their inhibitions and their ability to like behave reasonably and responsibly. Don't get that mad. If you know alcohol can cause you to get that mad, don't have that much alcohol. You can drink after the show. Go to a bar afterwards, get smashed there, okay? So that's rule number one. Rule number two, which I do actually think is a legit rule, is don't film. I should have double checked I'm pretty sure I have a video about it because I remember making it. Let's talk about bootlegs. Yes, I did make a video. Great, awesome. Editing may have fun just editing that out. I did make a video specifically about bootlegging, so I'll leave a card for you guys to watch that if you want my more in-depth thoughts. But too long didn't read. Don't film because A, you're stealing people's intellectual property. B, you don't have the permission of any of the actors or any of the creative team to film. Double down if there are children in the show. Why are you filming children? What are you, crazy? 3, you're not actually enjoying the actual thing in front of you if you're filming. You're probably watching it on your screen through your phone, which that's just sad for you because it's right there. Like, you can watch the full big thing happening in front of you instead of the tiny phone version. And then if you're anything like me, you're never going to watch that phone version again. You've just wasted your time and you've missed the full big thing in front of you that you could have just like watched and put into your memory and been like, oh yes, that was amazing, I felt all the feels, rather than, oh, I'm filming this. And fourthly, it is genuinely distracting for everyone else. Like, whenever I'm in a situation of looking at something and someone holds up a phone screen and they're in any part of my vision, my eye is immediately drawn to that phone screen because it is just brighter and the colors are more vivid and your eye automatically gets drawn. And then it's like, well, not only are you not seeing the full thing in front of you, like, I'm struggling to see the full thing in front of me because my focus is being pulled by that bright light over there. So unless like the people on stage are like, come on guys, get out your phones, film it for TikTok, then like, just don't film. So those are the 2 legit rules that I think are like actual rules. Don't do those things. Fighting and filming. Just have those on a little cue card for yourself. So if you feel like you want to punch somebody or you feel like you want to film, just pick it out being like, no filming, no fights. Great, awesome, nice. The rest of these rules, after some thinking and introspection and ruminating on my entire experience of theatre, I think I feel comfortable at the moment saying they are more like guidelines. Depending on the situation, strong guidelines, but guidelines nonetheless. And some of them may surprise you. Number 1, well, technically number 3, if we're carrying on the list. So number 3, if it's a musical, no singing along. Number 4, no talking. Number 5, no phones. Number 6 is a bonus one, which may really surprise you, but like, there are some shows with types of audiences that I've ushered on and they've got really salty about this when it comes to like what we sell in the bars and stuff. But no loud food. So I'm talking crisps, chips if you're American, anything with like rustly wrappers, like grab bags of chocolate and things. Any sweet that is individually wrapped, so like Werther's Originals. Any kind of like hard-boiled sweet where like the sweet is wrapped individually. I had a patron come up to me once, this was years ago, being like, why are you selling popcorn? Like, are they going to be eating during the show? And I was just like, yeah. I see her frustration. I can see both sides of the food thing, but profit comes before anyone's enjoyment of the show. Capitalism, baby. So yeah, so those are the rules that I feel are really more guidelines, to be honest. So why are these rules guidelines? Especially things like no talking and no singing along, because like I'm thinking of a specific thumbnail for a video, which was like, and literally in the thumbnail, if I can find it, I'll put a picture of this thumbnail for this video, but it literally says like, don't sing along ever. And I was like, oh, I have feelings about that. Yeah, and you might now be watching this being like, how dare you say that singing along is ever allowed in a musical, or that you should ever be allowed to talk in a show. Firstly, theatre is so much broader than I think a lot of people think or give credit for. And there are loads of different types of theatre where actually a lot of the things that would be seen as bad theatre etiquette to like when most people think of theatre etiquette, like those things are totally fine. For example, gig theatre, immersive theatre, outdoor theatre, family theatre or theatre for children, theatre in education, loads of those types of theatre, and that's not even every single type of theatre that there is, right? Those are types of theatre. And those are types of theatre where those rules don't necessarily apply. When you say that those are the rules of theatre, they're not always the rules of theatre. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Michaela, we all know what people mean when they say theatre etiquette. They're talking about proscenium arch, West End, Broadway, National Theatre, Carnegie Hall, prestige theatre, where you dress up nice and you go and you sit in the dark and you behave like a civilized human being. That's what we're all talking about. So why are you even talking about family theatre and TIE and outdoor theatre and immersive theatre? That's all just like, that's just weird stuff where obviously the rules don't apply. But like in proper theatre, the rules apply, right? I see you, I can see you, and I have a counter argument. In fact, I have two. One anecdotally from an usher friend of mine, and one from my own personal experience. Number one, the Barbershop Chronicles at the National Theatre. A friend of mine ushered on that show and told me about that audience because I was like, what was that like? We were just chatting about it because I watched the Barbershop Chronicles on NT Live during lockdown. On YouTube. I really enjoyed it though. I wish I'd been able to see it live, but I missed it. So the Barbershop Chronicles is a play about the Black African diaspora in the UK. It's set in a male barbershop. All of the characters are of African descent, apart from arguably one because he's of Caribbean descent from Jamaica, but then like that's also from Africa originally. It's kind of like via, if you know, depending how you feel about the nationalism between like African countries and Caribbean countries, but that's a whole topic for another day that has nothing to do with theatre, so we're just gonna scoot past it. And because of the subject matter of the play, the audience demographic was not your typical National Theatre audience demographic. And my friend was telling me that one of the interesting things about the audience that came to the Barbershop Chronicles is that they had more of a tendency to react verbally and vocally to what they were watching, i.e. they would talk. They would talk in a way that was reacting to the play. It wasn't like they were just talking about what they had for dinner or whatever, but they were engaging verbally with what they were seeing. And the whole audience was. It was quite funny, my friend, when she was telling me about it, she was saying that some of the ushers had a really hard time because they were like, people are talking and it's really like annoying, blah, blah, because they weren't used to that. But in terms of the audience, from what she said, there wasn't really any audience confrontation. There weren't audience members complaining about other audience members. My friend didn't mention if it was getting to any of the actors, I would imagine not. And the audience were fine because they were all on the same wavelength. So it wasn't a problem. Yeah, that audience was talking. And it's the National Theatre. I don't think you get much more prestige, at least in the UK, than the National Theatre. Second example, from my own ushering experience. So the first show that I ever worked on as an usher was Jersey Boys. If you don't know Jersey Boys, it's a jukebox musical about Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons. Act 2 is when you get Frankie Valli's like big solo song that he released, that is like the big one, Can't Take My Eyes Off of You. I think that's the title of the song. But the intro goes, you're just too good to be true, can't take my eyes off of you. And then the chorus goes, I love you, baby, and if it's quite alright, I need you, baby, etc, etc. If you've heard it, hopefully those two snippets will be like, oh yeah, I know that song. If you've never heard it before, it's fine. It's like from the 60s, I don't know. It's a banging tune though, to be fair. The theatre where that was on at the time seats 1,200 seats. 1,200 for my American viewers. And then each level, like the stalls was about 500, and then the Royal and Grand were about 300 each, give or take. And so if you're in the stalls, there are 2 ushers, Royal and Grand, there's 1 usher. It would get to that song. And there were several occasions when I was sitting in Act 2 and that song would come, and as the dude playing Frankie Valli started up the song, you just hear hundreds of voices just start to sing. Like you'd literally be sitting in, like I'd be sitting in by myself in like the Royal or the Grand, and just the whole Grand or the whole Royal would start singing. Oftentimes the whole auditorium, so like literally 1,200 people just singing along with the dude playing Frankie Valli. And like at that point it's like, how do I as one person get 300 people to stop singing and then expect my colleagues on the other levels to do the same? Like it's just not gonna happen, right? It's just, you literally, as soon as that happens, you stand up and be like, is everyone singing? Everyone's singing. You sit back down. You're not meant to sing in a show. You never sing along, ever, ever, ever. But it wasn't a problem because everyone is singing. So is anyone in the audience going to complain about people singing? No. And even if you're the kind of person who's been like, oh God, it's this kind of audience where people are singing along. Like, I'm not a sing-along girly. I don't want to hear like Joe from Devon. No offense to Devon, I'm sure you've got some great singers, but in this analogy, Joe has a terrible voice, he's tone deaf. I don't want to hear him singing, I want to hear the professional on stage singing. But if I'm in an auditorium and literally everyone around me is singing, am I gonna complain? No, I'm just gonna be like, well, we're doing this now. Awesome, okay. In both of those examples, people broke the rules, but the whole audience was breaking the rules. So then it's not a rule anymore, right? Because the whole point of the rules is to prevent conflict and to make sure that everyone in the audience is enjoying the show. That's the real point of the rules. The real point of the rules is so everyone can enjoy the show. Everyone has paid their hard-earned money, come into town or wherever to see this show, and we want everyone to have a good time. If everyone's idea of a good time is reacting vocally to a show, or if everyone's idea of a good time is to sing along in the big numbers, then everyone's having a good time and it's not a problem. That's why I'm like, it's not a hard and fast rule though. Okay, so if there is no hard and fast rules about singing, talking, etc., what are the rules? There needs to be rules when you're getting to the point where it's in the headlines that like ushers are being spat on, that showstops are needing to happen because there's riots in the auditorium, that police are being called. Like clearly there needs to be some rules. And like I said, Fights filming, in my opinion, definitely rules. But what about the rest of it? Because also, yes, like I said, if Joe Bloggs next to me who's tone deaf is singing, I'm gonna find that distracting, especially if no one else is singing and it's just him being like, nah. I think the rule is about acknowledging that you are in a room of other people. It's basically about being considerate and being respectful to the other patrons around you. Essentially, the rule, in my opinion, rather than being like, don't do this, don't do that, blah, 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 is more like, be respectful and don't be a dick. And that goes both ways, by the way. And also, that is also a rule where like, if you make a mistake, like if you start singing along or whatever, there's room to like backtrack, because if you're generally trying to be respectful and not being a dick, if you make a mistake and someone, you know, asks you to behave in a different way, that gives you room to be like, oh, sorry, and change your behavior. Like I said, this rule also goes both ways, in my opinion. So like, it's not just about don't be a dick, so don't talk. It's also don't be a dick, so don't jump to conclusions about why people might be doing certain things that you think are bad etiquette. The example I'm going to use here is mobile phones, because also in the past few months there's been a lot of talk about that. Actually, I think that issue with Hadestown, maybe that was like more than a few months ago. Time just blurs for me now. But anyway, phones are a huge contention. Front of house, it's their job to police that. So as an usher, it's my job to see if people are on their phones, not just filming, but just like in general, and, you know, make a judgment about when to intercede to say, put your phone away, the brightness is distracting to other patrons, and also the actors can see the glare from your phone, which is true. The actors can see the light and your face is lit up like a Christmas tree, just so you know. But that's my job as an usher to police. It wouldn't be my job if I was a patron, like if I was seeing a show, to police that. And you don't know why that person has gone on their phone. It could be a health thing. So just because for some reason I keep on getting adverts about diabetes on YouTube, I don't know why, but I'm pretty sure now you can get apps on your phone. So if you're diabetic, it can help you keep track of your blood sugar levels and let you know if you need to have something sugary. Not only that, but a lot of the things and tools that people use to make theatre more accessible are on apps on phones now. So for example, if there's an audio described performance, or if there are people with hearing aids or who are hearing impaired who need what's called a hearing loop to help amplify the sound a bit more for them so it's easier for them to hear, the devices that we use in the theatre to facilitate those things are phones. Like literally, if you come to the theatre with nothing but the clothes on your back and your ticket, obviously, and you need a hearing loop or you need like a hearing device to listen to the audio description, we give you a phone with an app on it. You might see that at first class not knowing what it is because you don't have those access needs and be like, oh, they're just on their phone. But actually that's allowing them to enjoy the show. I get that if you're going to the theatre for the first time, or you've only been a couple of times, you know, you don't have a lot of experience going to the theatre, being like, just be considerate and don't be a dick might not seem that helpful. And also it can seem quite confusing. So like, for example, if your only experience of theatre has been panto, where audiences are very loud and very vocal and they may well sing along to the songs and stuff, and then you go and see a West End show, you might find it quite strange that you're being told to be quiet, because your experience of theatre is you don't have to be completely quiet. Similarly, you might go to a West End musical and happen to be in the kind of audience where everyone in the auditorium sings along during like the big number, and you're like, oh wow, we can sing along, that's so fun. And then you go to a different show and you go to sing along, and then you get told off because not everyone in the audience is singing along, and you're like, well, I thought you were allowed to do that because I've done that before. And that's hard, and this is one of the reasons why you can't, in my opinion, talk about theatre etiquette without talking about accessibility. What theatre is accessible to people from lower income backgrounds, to people who live far away from major theatre hubs? The amount you go to the theatre gives you more data to be able to understand like what the nuances of the rules are, if that makes sense. Like, I can go to a show without worrying about what should I be doing. Like, I know how I feel comfortable behaving, and I know that I can behave in a way that's going to be respectful to everyone else. If you're newer to going to the theatre, you're not going to necessarily feel that way, and being told, just don't be a dick, guys, and you'll be all good, like, that might not feel that helpful. The advice I would give to people who are in that situation, who are maybe newer to going to the theatre, or it's your first time going to the theatre, or if you feel like there is things specific to your situation that make things harder, here are some tips for you. If you can, try and feel the vibe of the audience. This isn't something that everyone is very good at doing. It takes a certain amount of kind of emotional intelligence, I think, to be able to like gauge the vibe of a huge group. But if you can, try and feel that vibe and like be responsive to what is happening around you. Most of us, not everyone, because, you know, neurodiversity, things like that, but most of us can enjoy things in a variety of ways. Like, I could absolutely enjoy a sing-along of Hamilton if such a thing were to happen. Like, I could totally enjoy that. But I can also enjoy things without singing, you know? If you want to dance and it's not a point where people are standing or there's plot going on, there's nothing to stop you having a little boogie in your seat. I've done that plenty of times in theatre. You don't have to sit stock still. You don't have to like not feel emotions. You don't have to not react. It's about adjusting your reactions to what's happening in the room, if that makes sense. If you're the kind of person where you're like, I just need to know what I can and cannot do, if the rules help you, then use the rules. Like, if it helps you to be like, okay, for 2 hours, I'm not allowed to talk and I'm not allowed to sing and I'm not allowed to be on my phone, then do that, because, you know, you're not going to be disruptive if you don't do those things. But just be aware of like that being guidelines for you. You can't control how anyone else in the auditorium behaves, and everyone else's behavior is not your priority. Not priority. It's not your concern, it's not your job, it's not your... Oh my god. I feel like I'm getting stupider, you know? Everyone else's behaviour is not your concern. It is not your job to police other people's behaviour. You don't know why people are doing what they're doing. You can't know why people are doing what they're doing. It's not your job to police people doing what they're doing. So use the rules, but use the rules for yourself and your own behaviour. Maybe for the people in your party who you know, and that you can be like, hey guys, shut up, we're trying to watch the thing, you know. If you are someone who has access needs, particularly things like a learning disability or neurodiversity, and you're worried or you're nervous about going to the theatre, or you have just any questions or concerns about what it's like at the theatre, then definitely book through the actual theatre. Don't book through an agency, because the actual theatre can answer any questions you may have. If you're unable to do that or you haven't done that, coming to the theatre a bit early on the day so you can like ask any questions from box office or from the ushers, or just calling the theatre after booking your tickets to be like, hey, we're coming on this day, we're sitting here, we just have these questions. You know, you can do that. If you're nervous about this theatre and theatrical experience being overstimulating, or the pressures of, you know, sitting very close to people, or just like the expected societal etiquette that other patrons, other audience members will have on you, if all of that is too much, it might be worth looking into and asking about relaxed performances. In a nutshell, relaxed performances are just more relaxed. So the house lights stay on, people are sat further apart, there's breakout spaces, you can come and go from the auditorium as you need to. Sound levels and like extreme lighting effects are kind of brought down a little bit, so they're not as intense. More relaxed atmosphere, like the rules do not apply. And it's just a different way of enjoying theatre. So that is also an option. But I do want to add in here that if you're worried about involuntary noise and how theatre staff will react to involuntary noise, don't be worried. I'd say if that is something that is a possibility for you or someone that you're coming to the theatre with, definitely let the theatre know so that an usher by accident doesn't ask you to be quiet because they don't recognise the involuntary noise for what it is. But if we know it's involuntary noise, or as soon as we find out that it's involuntary noise, you will not be asked to be quiet. You will not be asked to leave. We would never ask you to move seats. You are perfectly entitled to sit and enjoy the show as it was intended. You don't have to book for a relaxed performance if you're someone who makes involuntary noise. You're perfectly welcome in a theatre space. So I just wanted to make that clear for anyone who doesn't know. And finally, what to do if people are being disruptive, especially because we have our no fighting rule. Please don't fight other patrons. If people are being annoying and disruptive to the point where you yourself are getting angry, just don't get involved. Of course, if you feel like you can assertively but politely be like, hey, can you keep the noise down, please. We're trying to watch the show or whatever. Then, like, by all means do that. If the other person starts getting in your face, because sometimes that happens, or they just ignore you and you're just getting more and more and more angry, just don't. If you can get yourself out of that situation, if you can feel like I'm gonna choke someone out and speak to a member of staff. Ushers can only go off what they see and hear, and then also what they're told secondhand. If the first thing that front of house sees of a conflict between two patrons is two patrons fighting, chances are you're both going to end up being kicked out and you're going to miss the rest of the show. Any kind of conflict is always going to be a he said, she said, and like, we know you're both fighting. And so if, as the third party who've only seen the fight, like, we don't know who started it, we just know you're both fighting and no fighting. Whereas if before an altercation has really started, you tell us, these people have been talking non-stop. I did ask them politely to stop and they ignored me and they've carried on, and now they're starting to antagonize me and they're making jokes and blah, 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 blah. You haven't done anything kick-outable. So you're protected from being kicked out. And then we can investigate further whether that's like observing, or if you've come to us in the interval, you know, trying to corroborate with any other information. Maybe some other patrons who are nearby have also complained about the same people, or maybe the other usher was like, I did see some people like talking over there, but I didn't get a chance to go into the row and speak to them, or whatever, to make the decision of like, okay, so what do we do? Do we talk to these patrons? Are we able to move the patrons that aren't happy? Like, you know, and find a solution that way. As soon as you're getting into altercations with other patrons, even if you are in the right up to that point, like you haven't done anything wrong up to that point, you're putting yourself in getting kicked out territory, which is not what we want for you. I mean, we don't want that for anyone either. Like, the last thing that front of house wants is to kick people out. It's long, right? We don't want to kick you out. We want everyone to enjoy the show. So be respectful, don't be a dick. If it helps, you should just be like, I'm not gonna sing or talk or whatever, even if everyone else is. Do that. Don't film, don't start fights, don't get into fights if you can avoid it. Yeah, those are the rules. I don't think it's helpful necessarily to just berate people for wanting to enjoy theatre by singing. Hi, it's editing me. Literally, I'm editing right now. Editing software in the background. At this point in the video, I went on a slight tangent talking about how we as theatre creatives and the theatre community can help steer and manage audience behaviour with our creative choices, which wasn't really what this video is about, but I do think it is an interesting tangential topic. So I've actually edited together a bonus video with that little section of material, which you can watch right now. I'll link a card up in the card bit in the top of the screen. That's the technical term. And I'll also link it down in the description if you would like to watch that after this video. But back to this video though, because we need to finish this one off. Those are my thoughts about theatre etiquette, theatre rules, and just the nature of keeping theatre accessible and fun. Yeah. Let me know what you think, if you think I'm just talking out of my bum, or if you think I'm making some good points. I do think it's complicated and it's nuanced, and I don't think there is a one-size-fits-all solution apart from just, please audiences, just don't start fights. Just don't start fights, okay? If you take anything away from this video, don't start fights, don't film, be considerate, don't be a dick. And, you know, everything else is in between, like, you'll probably be fine, I guess, maybe. What are your thoughts? In fact, apart from all the other things I've told you to put in the comments, what is your pet peeve at the theatre? My pet peeve is definitely filming. Definitely filming. And I guess like my more minor pet peeve Oh, mate, you know what? It's glass in the auditorium. My usher pet peeve is glass in the auditorium, because people always put them like under their seats when they're sitting down, and then they stand up and then the seat flips and then the glass breaks and there's just broken glass in the auditorium, and then you've got to go in and sweep it up and it's just long, and then also like you've got to wash it all. Like, I think it's better in terms of the environment, don't get me wrong. Environment, glass over like disposable plastic any day. We love that, but it's such a headache. And there needs to be a better solution. I think the ideal thing would be if drinks could come in like souvenir cups. So like, obviously you'd have to pay a little bit extra. I think they do this in some Broadway shows actually, but like your drink is put in like a souvenir cup. So the cup itself is plastic, unfortunately, but it's like reusable, like hard plastic, and it has like the branding of the show. So then you like have a souvenir and a beverage. I think that would be my ideal solution to the thing, because then as front of house / bar, we don't have to worry about washing crap tons of glass. The glass doesn't get broken. We're not using disposable plastic. Like, it's all good, you know? It's great. I love that. So yeah, those are my two pet peeves. One relatively petty, and one actually like, please don't. What are your pet peeves? Let me know in the comments. If you like this video, please consider liking and subscribing. Would love to have you on the channel. Come on down. We have a great time chatting all things theatre whilst wearing, in my opinion, a particularly cute outfit today. I'm getting better at dressing myself. It's only taken me like multiple decades. But anyway, stay tuned for more theatre content from a UK perspective, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye, friends!